G'day guys, and welcome back to the Boundary Riders Podcast. Today we're up to episode 28, and of course we just finished the first weekend of the finals. Massive win to Collingwood and Brisbane, who got on to the prelim. Carlton and the Giants were able to win their games in their elimination finals, so they go on to the semis. And as you can see on my right here, which is on the right, you can see the two semi-finals which have been revealed now. Melbourne will play Carlton on Friday night, and on Saturday night we have Port Adelaide and GWS at the Adelaide Oval. So of course today we'll be doing a little bit of a review of the first four finals, then we'll be going over the, big matchups, big moments of the semi-finals, which I think will be where the games will be won and lost. But we'll start off with a couple of things that went over the weekend, and we'll start with probably one of the biggest stories is the Braden Maynard decision to send him to the tribunal. Now, I actually think it's probably a good idea that they did send him to the tribunal, because I think it's a very hard one to look at. So I think to have a couple of extra days to take a look at it is probably a good idea. It's probably coming out on a Monday, so we'll see how this one pans out from now until then. I think he'll get away with it. I think he probably should get away with it. I've been tossing and turning what I believe about this. I just think at the end of the day that it's not much Braden Maynard could do in the air. And plus, I'm not a Collingwood supporter by any means, so I'm not really coming at this as... I know there would be a lot of people out there who are Collingwood supporters who are sitting there and saying this shouldn't have even been looked at. I think it kind of had to be because it was such a big injury to Angus Brayshaw. Obviously a massive concussion, didn't take any further part in the game and won't take any further part in the semi-final, maybe even the prelim, because he's had a history of serious head knocks a long time ago now, but obviously they want to be very cautious about this. I think that they have to look at this. I think he'll be fine. I don't think they'll have anything to talk about, because I think at the end of the day, he was going for the smother. There's not much he could have really done there. Yes, he braced for impact and possibly may have put out the elbow to cause maybe injury. I'm not too sure. I'm not going to speculate on that. But at the end of the day, there's not much he could have really done. Short of just landing on him like falling on him like this, I think it's pretty hard to... Every person in the world would have braced for impact there, and it's just unfortunate that Angus Brayshaw came off second best. I do think it is very deplorable how a lot of the Collingwood fans were cheering and all that sort of stuff, and when he was getting taken off the ground, I thought that was pretty disrespectful in my opinion. I think that's pretty disrespectful in any fact. If a player is getting taken off the field and they're celebrating the fact that a player has been seriously injured, I think that's crap. I don't know. It was very minimal. I don't think there was many people doing it, obviously, but I'm sure there was a few. And, a lot of people were talking about that, which is very, very crap. I don't think that should have been done at all. And yeah, basically, bottom line, Maynard will be fine. He'll be on to play in the prelim, I believe. And the other one was Van Rooyen, who got a week, and then Jack Martin, who got 2 weeks. I said to my brother, actually, that I think it should have been 2. And then looking at it now, I didn't realise that Van Rooyen's was actually graded lower. I'm actually very surprised that they're both not 1 week. So I think Carlton will go to the tribunal and will bring it down to a week. But I still think it is a week. A swinging arm like that, hitting someone in the face, had to go off for the concussion protocols. Nick Blakey, he did come back on. So he'll get a week. And Van Rooyen, rightly so, got a week as well. So I think everything will be sorted out by the start of the weekend. I think we'll be fine. I think all the players that are expected to be getting a week will get one, and the player in Maynard, I think, will be fine and will play in the prelim. Now, the other one I wanted to talk about was the score review of the Carlton v Sydney game late, when it was Blake Acres who got a touch onto the ball. And look, I'm going to admit it, Swans fan here, so I'm going to say this right now, that was touched, and I'm not going to try and dispute that. But what I will say is, yet again, we get blurry vision of a decision for a score review. Absolutely deplorable review system in the AFL, and I think they even said they're going to improve it for the finals. They had a blurred vision look at the touch behind for Blake Acres. In a big final, they are lucky they got the right decision, because we had to see a photo from a photographer in the AFL, Michael something, sorry, I can't remember his name, but we had to find that, I think it was 8 hours later the next morning, or a couple of hours later after the game, to find out if it was actually touched. It had to be someone who is a very good photographer to find that the ball was just hitting his finger. I think that is deplorable that we had to wait until then to find out the actual result, because that is absolutely crap. Now live, I thought it was touched, and Blake Acres did very well to touch both of them. Sorry, my cat keeps walking past me. That was him. But anyway, I just think it's absolutely deplorable, the score review system, and they are so far behind the AFL on this part of the game. And I know there's talk about, microchipping the ball and all that sort of stuff. This should have happened years ago. This shouldn't be talked about now that it's actually in the limelight, because this is deplorable that 2 or 3 games this season have been in big games for finals decisions or in the finals, haven't really been well looked at by the score review because of that. So I think it's good they got the right decision in the end. Carlton won the game. They deserved it. But it's absolutely deplorable that every single time we have a score review in these big games, we get this blurred vision and we can't even tell if it was touched or not. So, absolutely crap from the AFL, once again, with this score review system. But I've been screaming about this from the rooftops for a couple of podcasts now. So, we will move on and we'll get to the review of the first week of the finals. We started at the MCG with Collingwood versus Melbourne. This was a very hard-fought game between both very good clubs, both being expected to maybe make the grand final. But I think once again it kind of shone through that Melbourne's forward line is just going to be very hard to find goals. And I think we show that with the St Kilda game, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, Melbourne only kicked 7 goals this game. Yes, it was a low-scoring game, but Tom McDonald had a couple of good moments in the second half, but was hardly cited for the majority of it. Van Rooyen, who's probably been their best forward of the year, which is insane because he's only started this year, tall forward, is now suspended. So next week they're probably going to have to bring in either Brodie Grundy. They're probably going to have to bring in Brodie Grundy. So that's just, I don't know how that's going to work. He hasn't proven to be a good forward this year, and now they're going to have to chuck him in against Carlton, who are in very good form. But Collingwood, they couldn't put them away. I will say that. So Collingwood, I think, have a little bit of a concern on the fact that they can't put teams away, and it cost them. It's cost them in a couple of games this year. It's got very close. But in finals, do you really want to be banking on holding on in a big final? Like, this is, they'll be fine to get to the prelim. They'll play the Port Adelaide or the Giants. I just be a little bit concerned if I'm Collingwood that they got to shut out some games, because they dominated a lot. They dominated in a lot of parts of this game, but they just couldn't get it on the scoreboard in the end. And they were very lucky that Melbourne didn't kick straight, because Collingwood really were kind of lucky at a lot of stages to get through with this win. So they're good. They get a week off. They hopefully get Braden Maynard back for the prelim. But at this stage, Collingwood, I think, have a few more concerns than a lot of people are bringing up. But nonetheless, we get to the votes. 3 votes went to Steele Sidebottom, 2 votes went to Max Gawn, and 1 vote went to Christian Petrarca. Sidebottom, he's one of the oldest players at the club, just behind Pendlebury, of course. Massive to see him just play an absolute influential role, against 2 very good opponents in Lockie Hunter and Ed Langdon, and they won it on the wings in the end, Collingwood, I believe, just purely on Steele Sidebottom. They hopefully get Nick Dacos as well back in the prelims, so that's going to be massive for Collingwood. Max Gawn was leaps and bounds above anyone for the first half for Melbourne, and then Christian Petrarca got the 1 vote, who definitely came up to his own in the second half. That's why the votes have been given there. This is obviously a little bit more of it. This is like a sort of a pseudo medal for the finals as well. We'll be giving the votes every single week for every single game like we did all season. But yeah, at this stage, Max Gawn was very good. And that's going to be interesting next week as well, if Melbourne can continue their form. And Max Gawn can continue his really good form in the ruck as well, with Brodie Grundy likely coming back. But yeah, great win from Collingwood in the end. I've just got a couple of concerns on them, not as much as anyone else in the comp, so I think that they're going to be okay. I think they'll probably win their prelim game and probably make the grand final. We'll see how they go there. Melbourne, they've got to go the long way home now. And, Carlton next week, we'll talk about the tips later, but I think there could be, I think it's going to be a really tough game for them, and they've got to find another avenue to goal, because Bailey Fritsch couldn't finish in the end, and 7 goals in a final, it's not going to get, they will get tight, these finals, but I think a couple of clubs, especially up there fighting like the Brisbanes and Carlton and that, do have some potent forward line options, so that's the 2 teams they're going to have to likely beat to make the finals, they're going to have to beat to make the grand final from here in Melbourne. So a couple of struggles for them, more than Collingwood. We'll see how that pans out. Next game is Carlton versus the Swans, and Carlton deserved to win this game in a lot of facets, but on the other hand, Sydney, if they just kicked straight, they could have stolen this one. They were down all night, but were just able to stay with Carlton for the majority of it. Hayden McLean was massive in this game for Sydney. Arguably, I think he's probably their best player on the ground. We'll talk about the votes in a second. Carlton, though, Harry Mackay, he deserves way more scrutiny than he's getting at the moment. I think that it is deplorable. He missed 2 goals from probably a combined 15 metres. And in the commentary, BT, who I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, I think he's incredibly biased when he commentates. But at least he was about to call out Harry Mackay missing an absolute sitter. And then the other commentators, I think it was Luke Hodge and Richo at the time, were just saying, oh, but at least he was in the position. Bro, he missed goals. He's paid to kick goals as a key forward, and he misses from a combined 15 metres out. That is deplorable, and I honestly am surprised he's still in this team. I know, obviously, that he has to be there because he's not injured. But this guy won a Coleman a couple of years ago, and he can barely get on the scoreboard now. This is deplorable footy from him, and he needs to pick up his game, or else, if I'm Carlton, I'm looking to get rid of him, because he's on some good money, and he's not even doing his job. That was crap game from Harry Mackay, and he's lucky, because he almost cost them the win, because those 2 misses, I mean, those should have been goals, and they would have won this by 3 or 4 goals. But he almost cost Carlton a win, and I think Charlie Curnow is more than capable of holding that forward line up himself, and maybe pick up a recruit who can play a good foil to him. Because Harry Mackay's not doing that at the moment, and he had an absolute deplorable performance from him until he got before he got injured. So we'll see how he comes back if they can make the prelim, if he can come back by then. But yeah, terrible performance by him, and he needs to be scrutinised for it, because if he's doing his job poorly, he needs to be called out for it. It's like a forklift driver who is every single day going into work and scratching the back of it. If your boss doesn't call you out because he doesn't want to hurt your feelings, it's a shit boss. Alright, so that's crap from him, and he needs to pull his game up. But anyway, Sydney, they were lucky that Errol Goulden and Hayden McLean played well for the first 3 quarters, because there was a lot of passengers in this game for Sydney as well. Sydney held up pretty well in defence, I'll say that much, but there are a lot of passengers in that midfield. Warner needed to play a better game, he wasn't good enough. They had to chuck Luke Parker forward because Sydney's forward line wasn't doing good enough. Papley had a pretty poor game in my opinion. Will Hayward was unsighted for the majority of the game. I hardly even saw him. Sam Wicks was okay, but yeah, I think Will Hayward's obviously a big talking point as well. He's never really burst onto the scene for the Swans, and he needs to start performing next year, or else I think Sydney should be looking to get him out of there, because the hybrid forward is probably one of the biggest talking points for every side at the moment. Bailey Fritsch for Melbourne, all these top clubs have these hybrid forwards who are very good, and Sydney, I just don't think they have that option. You look at Carlton, they've got Jack Martin, who's playing brilliantly. Collingwood, I think Jamie Elliott's a pretty good hybrid forward. Jesus Christ. Brisbane, they obviously have Cam Rayner, who is massive, and Melbourne, Bailey Fritsch. These top teams have some really good hybrid forwards. Sydney need to get Will Hayward to play some good footy, and even the Giants with Toby Bedford and Brent Daniels playing some brilliant footy. You don't have to be tall, you don't have to be marking, but you have to make an effort every single week. You have to be playing in between the wings really well, and he's just not at the moment. So he's had a couple of good games this year for Sydney, but I think he's just been sitting there, showing everyone that he does have some sort of talent, but he just doesn't produce it often enough for Sydney. So, pretty poor performance by him, hardly even cited for the majority of the game. And in the end, even though Sydney had more scoring shots, I think they were very lucky to be this close for the majority of the game. I think Carlton, I'll talk more about how I fare with their options next week and how much of a chance I give them against Melbourne. But with the votes, I gave the 3 votes to Sam Walsh. He was massive, really stood up with the lockdown role on Paddy Cripps. He just couldn't get much into the game until the last quarter, but Sam Walsh really stood up for his captain. Hayden McLean, I gave the 2 votes. He was really good for Sydney, really coming-of-age game. He obviously played in the grand final last year, but Sydney was smashed off the park, so you can't really account that game for a finals performance. But this could really be a coming-of-age game for Hayden McLean. He was massive for Sydney. He took some really good contested marks when a lot of players on the ground couldn't, and he was a big reason why Sydney stayed in the game. So I think next year with Sydney, if they do get Brodie Grundy, he'll be a big second ruck for them. And taking those contested marks as a key forward is going to be massive for Sydney next year. And then the 1 vote went to Errol Goulden. He was fighting hard for that 1 vote. Blake Acres as well was fighting hard for that vote. But I gave it to Errol Goulden because I think he really got Sydney back into this game a lot of times. And he's just been massive all year for Sydney. So He definitely deserved that All-Australian spot, and good job for him. But yeah, Carlton was too good in the end, and they go to the final next week, where they do have a lot of chance. After that, though, we get to probably this is probably the least talked about final from the whole weekend, which was St Kilda versus the GWS. Giants really pulled away in the third quarter, I believe it was. Or was it the second? I watched this game and I can't even remember. Christ. Anyway, the Giants really pulled away, and I think they're going to be dangerous going into the rest of September, because one thing that really didn't happen in the Giants game was Toby Green getting away. I know he did set up a few goals, but I think Cal Wilkie played okay on him for a lot of the game. But the Giants just found other avenues to goal. Jake Riccardi had a massive influence on this game. Bedford and Brent Daniels were good at half forward. Josh Kelly had a massive performance, and Tom Green was massive as well. Kieran Briggs. They all really stood up in this game, and yeah, St Kilda, I mean, I think they've overachieved this year. I know that a lot of people would say, they weren't that far off last year, so you can't really say they're overachieved. I think that a lot of people at the start of the year would have been seeing them going backwards. So for them to have made the finals was, I think, very good for them. I honestly, at this stage, I can't see them doing it next year, but that's just my opinion. I think St Kilda did well to stay in this game, because I think the Giants had a lot of chances to just rip this game apart. But St Kilda did stay with them, made it interesting to the last quarter. But Adam Kingsley, I think he should be I know they're probably going to give the Coach of the Year to whoever makes the grand final. But I honestly think that he's had a massive year, Adam Kingsley. And I know I said Ken Hinkley a couple of weeks ago, but Adam Kingsley, to have got this team from 16th last year, to have lost two big players in Taranto and Hopper in the trade period, only bringing in Toby Bedford, who, not a lot of people would have seen as such a big get, has just changed this side into a really good team to watch. And a lot of people have been calling this like the team for Australia, the team who you should be barracking for, who, if you don't have a team this final series. And I tend to agree. I mean, they're a really good team to watch, and I wouldn't mind seeing the Giants go, deep into the finals this year. So great win from them. Adam Kingsley could be Coach of the Year. I think he's definitely up there, top 3 by far. But now we get to the votes. Tom Green, he got the 3 votes. He just pipped out Josh Kelly, in my opinion, because I think at the end of the day, Tom Green really went well in all the way through the game. I think Josh Kelly really got tagged well by got tagged pretty well in the second half. But I think when the game was really to be won in that first half, Josh Kelly really stood up and was massive, and it was too late for Winhager to go to him. The damage was done. And the one vote may surprise a few people. I know Rowan Marshall had a lot of touches and stuff, but I actually gave it to Kieran Briggs. And the reason why I think that is, I think he dominated around the ground with Rowan Marshall. Now, I know Marshall's always going to get his touches. He's definitely one of the best ruckmen in the league. But Kieran Briggs really stood up in the ruck contest. It's really helped out his midfielders. And bringing back Stephen Coniglio next week is really going to help this midfield for the Giants, who are already massive in this first final. So I give them a real chance against the loser of the next game, which is Brisbane versus Port Adelaide. The Lions kicked straight. They did really well. 19 goals, 9. I think they were 15 goals, 5 at three-quarter time. So that was just very good. They took their chances. Port Adelaide were very lucky, I think, to be this close for a lot of the game. They kept on coming back at Brisbane, but at the end of the day, Brisbane just pulled away. And 48-point win in the final, that's pretty big. Brisbane will relax and go to the prelim with another home final, which is going to be really hard for Carlton or Melbourne having to play that. Joe Danaher was massive. He kicked 5 goals. He really needed to stand up, and he needs to stand up this final series to get Brisbane over the line. He was really good. Cam Rayner in the first half was absolutely massive. He kicked 3 goals? Yeah, 3 goals. And just played really well for Brisbane. I will give one little shout out to Ollie Lord. He was really good for Port Adelaide. He was their best forward by far. And that's surprising when you got Todd Marshall up there, who couldn't kick straight to save his own life in this qualifying final, which I think, looking back at it now, he did have a bit of the yips in the 2020 prelim final against Richmond, I remember, which at the end of the day really cost them the game because they couldn't convert, and they lost that big final. And maybe he's got the yips again in finals. So Ken Hinkley really has to get to him this week and just has to tell him, look, you just need to relax when you go for goal and you'll be fine. Because at the end of the day, when they had a chance to come back, Port Adelaide, they really couldn't. They couldn't, produce a comeback because they weren't kicking straight at big opportunities. And McCluggage played really well. And the other player I want to talk about, I'll save when I make the votes. But really good game from Brisbane. You know, they're going to be hard to beat in their prelim final at home. Still yet to lose a game at the Gabba this year. And I think they've had like 50 wins of the past 58 or something at the Gabba. So, I mean, any team that goes up there is going to have a tough job to do, really lock down this attacking line. And I really, at the moment, I almost, this may be a bit of a surprise, but I really give Brisbane a big chance at the premiership now. I think their defence is actually standing up really well. If they get past the prelim final, because we've seen them choke at this stage of the season a lot of times, if they can make it past the prelim and finally get to the grand final, I give them a chance in the granny. So they're actually I think at the moment, I know this may surprise a lot of people, but they're my premiership favourite right now. So that's just a call from me. Everyone can roast me in the comments for it. But to the votes now, Joe Danaher got my 3 votes. 5 goals in a final was massive and really got them going. Hugh McCluggage got the 2 votes. He was really good in the middle, and when he looked like he may have gone down with an injury, I think it was in the second quarter. He really, that was going to be a really big loss, but he came back onto the ground and had a huge influence on this game. So he got the 2 votes. And the 1 vote went to Jasper Fletcher. Now, this guy has only played, I think, a handful of games before his first ever final. He kicked 3 goals from the wing, and he was just massive. Jasper Fletcher may just be coming of age moment for him. I know I've said that a few times in this episode, but Jasper Fletcher really stood up in his first ever final, and we'll see if he can back it up again in the prelim. But playing as a young wingman, you know, sometimes you can have your cold days out on the wing. Sometimes it can be on the outer side. But he took his role in that game and played an absolutely massive role for the Lions in this one. And, you know, they've got someone there who they can really work on. The father-son pick, Jasper Fletcher, really coming of age game for him. And he got the 1 vote in the end. But guys, that is the review of the first week of the finals. So now, of course, we get to the semi-finals, which are first Melbourne versus Carlton. Now, they only played a couple of weeks. They only played, a month ago? So, you know, pretty fresh in the mind, both of these teams playing against each other. Carlton, I honestly think they used all their effort in that first game. I feel like they did. I know a lot of people will get excited about the fact that Carlton won their final. They're looking really good. But I think, especially at the end of the game, you can kind of see it on the players. They were happy, obviously. They were going to ground. They were ecstatic that they won their first final in 10, 11 years. But I think they may have just used all their effort in that game against the Swans. I think Melbourne will bounce back. I think that they've got a really good defence to lock down Charlie Curnow. Harry Mackay, I don't think will play. And obviously Jack Martin will be out as well, which I think are 2 massive losses for... I think that Jack Martin's actually a pretty massive loss because he was really influential in that first final, taking a couple of really good marks late in the game and playing pretty good up forward as well. So I'm going to give Melbourne a pretty big win. I'm going to give Melbourne the win here. That's who I'm tipping for this game. I will say, though, that Melbourne, if they cannot find a way forward, they are going to struggle. If they cannot find an avenue to goal in this game, I give Carlton a slight chance if they're ready to fight for this game. Because, yeah, I think that Melbourne do have a serious issue up forward, but I just think they'll rectify their mistakes in that first final, do really well against Carlton, and I think they'll win by a couple of goals. That's my opinion. I do think the one big matchup, though, will be someone who goes to Adam Sard. So I think he had a pretty big influence on the game against the Swans. I think that one of the Melbourne players has to go to him and lock him down. And I think that Max Gawn needs to have a big game as well. Because De Koning actually had a couple of big moments against the Swans. And I think that Max Gawn really has to dominate in the ruck. If Brodie Grundy comes into this team, well, that's just something they're going to have to deal with. And I think that Brodie Grundy, if he does come in, whoever that key forward is who comes in to help the Demons next week, really has to have a good game. Because if they have too many passengers, Melbourne, they're going to get beaten and be out in straight sets once again, as what happened last year. But then we get to the second semi-final, Port Adelaide versus the Giants. This, I think, is 50-50. This is a really tough semi-final. Like I said in the other one, I know that I just kind of thought that Carlton shot all their shots against the Swans, so I think they may struggle against Melbourne. But I don't think the Giants really shot all their shots at St Kilda. I think that the Saints got well beaten, and I think the Giants have a lot more in the tank. And Port Adelaide, yes, they have a few injuries. They obviously got a couple in that game as well from Dylan Williams and potentially Trent McKenzie. But I think that Port Adelaide should be doing a lot better, and I think it is a failed year if they don't make it past the prelim. Make it to the prelim at this point, because they've had such a good year. Yes, their last couple of months have been pretty poor, But they've done so well in that middle period to get themselves into this position. So to go out in straight sets, I think would be really disappointing. I think that whoever matches up on Bedford and Daniels needs to have a good game. It'll probably be McEntee, one of them. Sorry, not McEntee. Oh, Jesus Christ. I think Riley Bonner will come to the team and match one of them up. And we'll see who the other defender goes to. Dylan Williams will be out, so that's probably where Riley Bonner will come in. And we'll see who goes to the other one, maybe Farrell. But they have to play a good game on these guys and have to, keep them accountable, off half-back, start to make some decisions. Because these guys just are probably some of the best half-forwards. They're playing a really different role to a lot of half-forwards recently and that we've seen in recent times. And I think the Giants can get up here. But I am going to tip Port Adelaide because they are at home. I can't pick against them here. I think they will be too strong. I think they will get... It'll be interesting if they do bring back Dixon because I can't see them dropping Marshall. They may drop Finlayson because he hasn't played well, especially last month. Although in saying that, he has been a pretty good ruckman this year. But I think that if at this stage, if I'm Port Adelaide, I know Finlayson had a really good first half of the year, but since then he's really dropped off. I think it may be time, if they're going to drop someone, to drop... Finlayson because Ollie Lord, I've really struggled to see them dropping him after that performance. He played really well and he was their best forward. So I think maybe Dixon will come back. They really do need him because I think that he can really lock Sam Taylor away and or Ollie Lord could go to him as well. We've seen that obviously in that game against Brisbane. They put Ollie Lord to Harris Andrews and had a really good influence. So maybe they could do that as well. But at this stage, I'm going to tip Port. But I give the Giants a real chance here. And I think Giants versus Collingwood at the MCG, which is a replay of the... what was it? Was it the 2019? The replay of that prelim final? I think it was. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I've completely forgotten now. But I think it was the 2019 prelim final where they beat Collingwood at the MCG. So, Port Adelaide, I'm going to give the tip here. And I got all 4 of my tips last week, so you should be taking my tips seriously because I'm obviously always correct, even though I think most people got 4 last week. I think Port Adelaide will win. I think they will bounce back. I think Ken Inkley will get to them. I think he'll say, look, we had a bad week last week. We'll bounce back this one, and we'll definitely get back on the board. That's just my thoughts at this stage. My pick for, the big matchups, I think... Todd Marshall has to have a big performance. He needs to bounce back from last week. So if he gets Buckley or Taylor, he needs to have a big influence on this game. I think that Ollie Wines needs to really lift, or he's going to be... I honestly think at this stage, if Ollie Wines doesn't lift, he's going to lose his spot in this team very quickly next year because Connor Rosie and Zach Butters are absolutely dominating. Willem Drew had a really good performance on Lachie Neale. So if he doesn't lift as a Brownlow medalist from a couple of years ago... Ollie Wines really needs to lift for Port Adelaide because he had a pretty poor performance in that final. And Travis Boak, I think that was really stupid to play him as the sub. He brought nothing to the second half because... no offense to Travis Boak, but he's not a good sub because he doesn't bring much run to the contest. He should have been either in that team or dropped. You don't put him as the sub. They had Francis Evans as a sub option who's been good this year as a sub. But Travis Boak brought nothing to the table. And yeah, I think that would have frustrated him a little bit. But yeah, I think it just frustrated. I think it would have frustrated a few Port fans too because he had a pretty poor performance coming onto the ground. And I think if Travis Boak's going to play next week, he has to be in the 22. He can't be the sub as well. I will be trying to stream the 2 semi-finals as well next week. We did do 3 this week, and I really appreciate everyone who joined the streams. A couple of people actually mentioned as well, and I know it's a bit weird, but if you guys want to watch my stream and just have it on in the background while you're watching the footy, I'm more than happy to, have people in the chat tell me what time is the footy on, because I've had a few people do that. A couple of international viewers as well has been really cool. Someone from the US was watching the GWS game. He's a GWS supporter from the US. That's really cool. And an Irish guy was watching the footy as well was watching our stream, because I know a lot of places find it really hard to watch the stream, and I can't obviously broadcast the game on the channel because the channel will just get ripped down for copyright. But I do like the commentary stuff. You can probably watch the shorts on this channel and see the commentating. And look, I think I'm pretty good at it, but there are some times I'll make a mistake. So hopefully, if you guys want to join the stream, enjoy my commentary, maybe watch a few shorts if you think it's pretty interesting. Maybe click through a couple of streams, just click through a couple of bits and see if you enjoy the commentary that I do. I try to make it a little bit more interesting than just sit there and, say a couple of words about a different play or whatever. I try to make it a little bit different from other AFL YouTube channels who do the live streams, because I think a lot of them, they're actually quite good, but obviously they have a lot more viewers, so they have a lot of more time to talk to other people. But mine's a little bit different, how I like to, commentate the games, because I wanted to be a footy commentator as a kid. I used to play the old AFL games and commentate when I was playing, and my brother used to hate it. Well, not hate it, but he used to get annoyed by it. So, yeah, anyway, I really appreciate you guys joining the stream. I really appreciate the channel, the support we've been getting recently. We've already got over 200 subscribers now. We're actually halfway for the watch hours on this channel. So that means that if we can whip the other half by the start of next year, we can have this channel monetized, which would be really cool for next season to start. Not that really we're doing this channel for money, but wouldn't be mind having a little bit of pocket change, especially with the petrol prices recently. I kind of need some extra petrol money, and I'm sure my brother would. I don't know. He'd probably get about. He wants 50%, but let's be honest, Jack. You don't edit the videos, so you don't do. You come in to do the trade video. I'll give you 30%. If you can stop working. If we can ever stop working and just do this podcast, that would be really fucking good. But anyway, that's enough talking from me, guys. Thanks for joining the 28th episode of the Boundary Riders Podcast. Let me know what sort of merch you'd like us to make in the future. That's all from us. Hopefully your team, if they're still in the finals, will be able to win next weekend or go through in the prelim. That's all from me, but we'll catch us all next time. Oh, and also, we will be having another trade video out this week. So, yeah, make sure to tune in for that. But that's all from us. So, we'll catch us all next time.